Hey there, this is Harvey. Let's talk about the oil leak problem you're having with your Cayman. The engine I'm going to show you is a 2006. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of difference, but you're just going to have to kind of keep an eye on things to see if something doesn't appear to be the same as your engine. First of all, maybe you've never done it, but there's a carpet cover over the back horizontal surface of the engine. You pry it out around the edges and it'll pop out. And then there's a metal cover underneath, and it has 5 Torx screws that hold it in. I meant to get the number on these before I got started here. Let me see. Yeah, it's Torx T30. T30 is the bit that'll take those out. And then that metal cover comes right off. So apparently people have been talking to you about your AOS, which confuses me a little bit. But okay, here's the overview of your engine compartment. I'm sitting in the back trunk area. So there's the middle, and then off to the right here, that is your AOS. And it is pretty firmly bolted down in to the engine here. What the AOS does in the manifold, in the intake manifold, there's quite a bit of vacuum. That's what sucks the air in. And this intake manifold vacuum is routed to the AOS by 2 hoses. They come together and they input right here. So the fresh air intake is sucking on this side of the AOS. On the other side of the AOS, there's 2 connections. One goes directly to the top of the cylinders for 1, 2, and 3. And then there's a long corrugated hose. You can see it here. You can see it down here, and it sucks oily air from the crankcase, oil-laden air from the crankcase. And there's a membrane right in here, or filter, if you will, and it causes the oil to drop out into the bottom of the AOS. So that is basically the separation process, thus its name. So the oil drops into the bottom of the AOS. Relatively clean air goes over here to the intake manifold. And then the oil that drops to the bottom, there's a rubber hose down here. It's a 90-degree hose. It goes vertically from the bottom of the AOS and then horizontally into the side of the engine, and it drops the oil back in to the crankcase. A lot of people, one of the commenters said, well, these AOSs fail a lot. But like I said, what he's talking about is if the membrane, the filter in here, tears, well, all of a sudden, all the oil that's supposed to drop in the bottom sucks into your intake, and you get this massive white plume of smoke out the back of your car. That does not sound like a problem. If somebody's telling you the AOS is leaking, I would be a little surprised if the actual plastic AOS is leaking. Probably much more likely is that this $2 hose at the bottom here might be have a split. The clamps might be loose. I don't understand why it's failing on yours so quickly. Maybe somebody put the same hose back in. I don't know. But the most likely place for an AOS to leak oil is out the bottom in the collection area through this rubber hose. Yes, the plastic of the AOS could have a split in it, and it's oozing oil, but I can't, you said you're on your second or third AOS. I just don't believe that. That doesn't make any sense. Now, another thing that I have seen leak are these corrugated plastic hoses. They're nothing special, and they're getting older every day. And especially this one that goes across through here, it actually goes way up in there. It comes across, it jumps out right here, it shoots around, and it goes down. When I rebuilt my engine with 100,000 miles, that corrugated hose just kind of broke apart, literally in my hands when I took it out. To me, that could be something that has failed. Now, there isn't much oil in that hose, but yes, there is some oil, especially after you shut the engine off and all the pressures equalize. Well, the oil that was in the process of going from here around to the AOS will settle into the bottom of that hose. So if you clean your engine up, I would start to look for evidence of oil leakage from the corrugated hose. Not so much these. These should be relatively oil-free. And then the 90-degree hose down at the bottom. Those are the two places I think the AOS could be leaking. Now, it's not trivial to replace these hoses, but just replacing the AOS is just part of the job. What you need to do is replace these corrugated plastic hoses. And just if you do this job one more time, say, I want all the hoses replaced. Don't take anything less than that. Maybe somebody didn't fully understand that message. These connectors right here are kind of they're designed to be something that can be put together quickly on an assembly line. It's possible that it's leaking right here. There's a connector right here. This corrugated hose attaches to a metal fitting that's bolted to the top of the engine. It's really hard to get to. But when somebody's talking about replacing your engine, that just doesn't make any sense. Now, that's the AOS. If you read my really long article about the oil system on these cars, there's a lot of places where oil is circulating through the engine at pressure. But very rarely do those fail. But let's just mention a couple. Right here is a shiny metal box that is a heat exchanger between the oil and the radiator coolant. It has O-rings in the bottom, and if the O-rings are starting to weep a little bit, it could leak oil. That oil would wind up on this left-hand side of the engine, not anywhere near the AOS. Another extremely rare possibility would be the valve cover gaskets might be starting to leak oil. They're not under pressure, but there's a valve. There's three cylinders and a cylinder head and valve cover gasket on the right, and there's one on the left. I'm not going to get down under the engine, but if you look under your engine and you see oil coming out at the joint between the engine and the transmission, that oil is likely coming from the rear main crankshaft seal. That is a known failure point. It's got nothing to do with AOS, and to replace that seal, you have to remove the transmission, and then they can pop a new seal in there. It's not an inexpensive repair job, but it's certainly not an entire engine rebuild. And then underneath, there are, if you look under your car and you see oil down there first, then we need to have another discussion, because that's got little to do with the AOS. You say you find pools of oil on the ground, but you really need to find out where it originates at. That's why I recommended the dye and the ultraviolet light, because you could have this cover where you'd pop it off maybe once a week if you're driving the car that much, and you could shine your ultraviolet light in there in a darkened garage, and you'd see the start of the oil well before your naked eye might be able to pick it out. And then you'd have something to go on as far as doing a diagnosis. So we're getting close to the 10 minutes that YouTube typically allows, so I'm going to cut it off here. But hopefully that'll give you some ideas on what to look for.